quorum, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I call this meeting of the Guam Election Commission to order. It is 1:01 p.m. Monday, April 14th. We are located here at the Guam Election Commission conference room in Oka Building, Tumuning, Guam. We're also live stream the GEC website at gec.guam.gov/board. Quorum is present. Present today is myself, Jerry Crisostomo, Chairman, Commissioner Joe Mafnas, Co-Chair, Commissioner Benny Panala, Commissioner Tony Gumatauto, excuse absence, Commissioner Pat Seville, as well as Commissioner Ricky Orsini, and Commissioner Joe Meno. Also with us is our legal counsel, Vince Camacho, and excuse absence is our Executive Director, Maria Pangilinan, but Tom Songstein, the Acting Executive Director, is present. Certification of public notice requirements. The notice requirement was published on the Guam Daily Post and the Guam Public Notice website on April 7th and April 9th, respectively. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Okay, moved by Commissioner Panala, second by Commissioner Gumatauta. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay, moving on to item 4, the approval of minutes of February 19th regular meeting and March 20th regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes subject to any corrections?
Mr. Chair, I hereby move that we approve the minutes of the February 19th and March 20th regular meetings, subject to correction.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Gumatauta to approve the meeting minutes of February 19th and March 20th, subject to any corrections. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Commissioner Panala. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay, motion passes. Moving on to item 7, correspondence. Tom?
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you. So on April 1st, we received a correspondence from former Senator Thomas Fisher. He's requesting that the board look into the executive order signed by the president, the preserving and protecting the integrity of elections, of American elections. He's requesting that the board review it and take a position on it for the 2026 elections. I believe the matter is presenting about proof of citizenships for the federal offices. So any voter who wishes to participate in the federal office must show proof of citizenship in like the form of a U.S. birth certificate or passport. Yeah.
So are these for individuals running for federal office or voters that will be voting in a federal election?
These are for voters who will be voting in the
So
federal
they would have to present proof of
proof
U.S.
of
citizenship.
U.S. citizenship. Huh? Oh, okay. Oh, and then if Vince, if he can provide the summary of the executive.
Okay, legal counsel.
Okay, Mr. Chair, so on March 25th, 2025, President Trump issued Executive Order 14151 entitled Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of the American Elections. The order introduces new federal directives related to voter registration, ballot counting deadlines, and election system oversight. So while its aim is to enhance election security, there are or could be several impacts on how Guam conducts the federal elections for 2026. So some of the key provisions, there are basically 4 key provisions. One is, of course, that you guys mentioned earlier, documentary proof of citizenship. So those individuals registering to vote must provide some documentation proving U.S. citizenship, such as an U.S. passport, real ID, or birth certificate. Election day ballot deadline is the next provision. All ballots must be both cast and received by the election Commission in order to be counted. There is an exception to the UACAVA ballots, and those are the ballots for overseas military personnel and those who are working abroad outside of the United States. So those UACAVA provisions will be maintained, and we'll get into that. Another interesting provision is that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, is directed to review state and territorial voter registration lists for accuracy and citizenship status. So it may require the Guam Election Commission to submit its voter roster to the federal Department of Homeland Security so they can ensure that they are actually citizens prior to the election. Another key provision that can affect the Guam Election Commission, especially in Guam, is, as you know, we get money from EAC. And so that's federal funding, which would be tied to compliance. So as the president has done in other issues, if you don't comply, you don't get the funding. And so election-related federal funding may be withheld from jurisdictions that don't comply with the executive order's requirements. So the potential impacts for Guam, based upon those key provisions, is again voter access. New documentation requirements could create barriers, especially for those who don't have a passport or don't have real IDs and have to rely on birth certificates. And so for those individuals primarily who were not born on Guam, it may be difficult to get a copy of their birth certificate in order to register, but those are just some of the highlight issues. Absentee voting, current Guam procedures may be needed to be revised to comply with the ballots cast and received by Election Day, because right now we follow the 10 days for absentee, which is separate and apart from the UACAVA. And then GEC may be required to provide the voter data to Homeland Security to ensure compliance with the citizenship, which may lead to data privacy concerns. Federal funding is an issue that could impact the Guam Election Commission. And just know there are several legal challenges currently in the courts challenging the authority to present these changes to the federal election. However, right now, the executive order does remain in effect, and the board should sort of consider what it needs to do to revise its current policies and procedures pending the outcome of the litigation. So that's pretty much a summary of what I just took a look at the executive order real quick and sort of itemized the potential impacts to Guam.
Okay, open the floor for any questions or comments from the commissioners. Commissioner Pinello?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments. Number one, the concern that Attorney Tom Fisher has, if a voter comes to the voting poll and doesn't have the valid ID, I'm pretty sure we would still allow them to cast a provisional ballot until we could qualify and validate the identification. So I think that's a minor type of issue for us to look at because we already do things of that nature currently. I think it's very important that the people of Guam, have full faith and belief in the election system and the rule of law, and we should protect the integrity to ensure good elections results are provided to the people.
Yeah, I think we require an ID when you go and cast your vote. I think it's to register to vote requires proof of citizenship. Now they just take an affidavit so now, based on this executive order, they have to provide these forms of ID that they are a U.S. citizen. But I would like to have I think Vince gave a summary, but for the commission to break down the recommendations, because we have to go to the legislature if we're going to make any amendments to the statute, right, based on this executive order. And I think it's prudent to assume that the executive order stands and pending all these legal challenges, but because it is an executive order and it stands today, we're going to follow this. But we need some concrete points to be able to make amendments to the legislature as to how we would comply. What is the breakdown of federal funds versus local funds?
Currently, Mr. Chair, we currently have about $501,000 in our balance for the federal funds. That includes the election securities grants and the poll worker programs.
Okay, so that's pretty significant. Okay,
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair,
Magnus, yeah.
just one quick question here. I understand what Vince just explained to us, but my question here, we're going to do a revision here. What is our time frame for this one? Do we have any time frame? Because I need to look at all this before I make my own comment too as well, because we're being faced with this federal executive order. Do we have any time frame? No, but I'm saying for us to revise. Anything?
Any decision you guys make right now that affects a federal election needs to be put into effect now. So that's why I think Mr. Chair is asking the Election Commission to go back and figure out what we need to do in order to comply, because right now it is in effect. Pending, of course, the litigation in the different jurisdictions. But right now, if you're registering someone to vote, they should have
Yes, the
Proof.
valid ID. and all that.
proof of citizenship. So it's passport, real ID, or birth certificate, right? Or whatever documentation proves you are a U.S. citizen. The other stuff, such as submitting the voter registration to Homeland Security, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because unless there's an election coming up. This is anticipated for the 2026 election. And so the voter registration issue, maybe you'll have time for. I know your funding is annually, and so it may be part of this upcoming fiscal year budget for 2026, 27. So this may be something you also need to take a look at with the Guam Election Commission to ensure if this funding, if you don't comply, that this funding may not be there for next year. And I think the funding that we've used in the past went to pay for the additional costs for the precinct officials. So if that's not there, then that's when you may have to go back to the legislature for additional appropriations. And then, of course, the other thing is making sure that your absentee ballot provisions, we don't have an election until 2026, but UACAVA, just understand that UACAVA does still apply. But for those regular absentee ballots, we would need to go back to the legislature and have the law amended to comply with the executive order, stating that if the ballot is not in by the election night at close of business, that ballot will not count. There's no more 10-day grace period. So right now, Mr. Vice Chair, the provisions of the executive order remain in effect, are in effect.
Yeah. So because the executive order is in effect, as we're registering new voters, are we asking for proof of citizenship?
Right now, currently, Mr. Chair, it is an affidavit, so it's based on attestment. So there is no requirement that proof of citizenship be shown. It's required that the applicant attests to being a U.S. citizen and, of course, meeting the residency requirements here.
But I think now that the executive order is in effect, I think we need to ask these potential new voters a proof of citizenship.
Yeah.
So the affidavit is currently in process, but now that this executive order has been signed by the president, I think we need to come into compliance and ask for passport, real ID, birth certificate. And if they don't have any of these, then, that's something that they can take up with the commission. But the executive order is pretty explicit what forms of ID is needed. When was this signed? This was just in March, right? Yeah. And we're, under the assumption that it is in effect, of course, pending these legal challenges, but we're going to have to follow the executive order and require that they show proof of ID. I know we've had instances in the past, I don't think this last election, but where individuals registered to vote and somebody brought it up that they weren't U.S. citizens. And so the affidavit is fine and dandy if they're telling the truth, but I agree, I think you need to prove that you're a U.S. citizen to vote in a U.S. election, including Guam. So, yeah, if we can
Just a
proceed.
footnote there, Mr. Chairman, Arizona is already cleaning up their voter roll. They're getting rid of 50,000 voters off their voter roll because of this.
Yeah.
50,000 voters, that could really sway an election.
So, yeah, I think, is that what, commissioners have any comments on that? But we should follow the executive order as far as the proof of ID or proof of citizenship, because we're registering voters today, leading into the next election. And if that's the case, then we should instruct the commission to proceed in requiring a proof of citizenship upon registration.
I have a question for our legal counsel. If we, would we be subject to any type of lawsuits if we don't comply?
Well, right now, the only real penalty is the loss of your federal funding.
No, that's one, but could you say, a citizen or a group, could they sue us for not complying?
Well, in our society, anyone can sue anybody, right? Whether they have standing to sue is an argument that we would make in court. But right now, the executive order, if we go in order of priority in terms of what is precedent, it's, of course, the Constitution, right? Then the statutory provisions, and then the rules and regulations, and then the executive orders. So right now, based upon what the executive order says, I don't know if anyone can sue other than the federal government saying we are not in compliance. That's just something I haven't looked at.
The reason I asked is because I noticed that in the case of the Arizona election, there's a group called the American First Legal that sued Arizona.
For
this,
this
yeah.
executive order.
So I'm just curious if, we would also be subject or open to lawsuits such as that. So I'm with you, Mr. Chairman. I think we should comply.
Yeah, lawsuits legal except can fly any which way, but the executive order is in effect, and we're required to comply.
Yep.
Right? At least in that provision of asking for proof of citizenship. The other provisions will follow once we make some changes to it. And then as far as responding to Attorney Fisher's letter, I think we need a response to that from the commission.
Yeah, we can draft something and then present it to you guys. And then, of course, you can say yay or nay on that.
Yeah.
Tom, to your knowledge, have the commission never, found out or noticed if a non-citizen ever voted in our election?
To my knowledge, no. But prior, if you're looking at old laws too, at one point in time, there was a requirement, there was a law in the books that did require proof of citizenship. Yeah. It was actually back in, I guess, the early 2000s where we did require passports and birth certificates. However, when they updated the election code, we did remove that. They did remove that requirement and left it up to just being an attestment. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think our process here is tight. I know in the past we required proof of citizenship to register, and then when that changed, it was just an affidavit. So going back to that is...
And then especially with the motor voter, we do have access to what they applied for, and then of course they do a test, and then it's also reflected on the DMV system if they're a U.S. citizen or not. And then of course if everything checks out, we process them as
Yeah.
a new registrant or update their registry.
Yeah, I just have a problem with attestation, especially when it comes to votes. So proof of citizenship is the fairest way to go. You know, but, so yeah, if you can prepare a draft for Attorney Fisher, and then secondaries were the points that legal counsel summarized. I think we need to break that down further as to what we need to go to our oversight chair, the legislature, and see what needs to be amended.
codified.
Yeah,
We need to codify this, so that there's no question.
yeah.
And the only thing I mentioned that is because our legal is saying about the federal funds, so if we get hit on that, then of course the legislature has to come up with the funding for us. So we need to really kind of bring it up to the chair of this, which is Senator Teitig, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at $501,993.27. That's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, let me just clarify. So currently, we did receive those grant fundings, so that's what we have in the balance is 501. But normally, we do receive about 200,000 annually from the election securities grants. But I believe, however, they did inform us that this year, it will only be 15 million that will be divided amongst, but they have not guided us yet on how the funds will be allocated.
Is that formula driven there, Tom?
I'm not too. They're actually going to look at it because the EAC only got awarded 15 million, so they haven't give us any guidance on how that money will be allocated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep us
Okay.
posted, Tom.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, let's move to the Executive Director's report.
Okay, Mr. Chair, on page 21 is our timeline. So we are up to date with our timeline, and currently there has been no additions to it as of yet. And then after the timeline, we do have our monthly precinct breakdown. Today, as of March 26, our current registry is at 50,655. And then the breakdown, of course, you can find from the DMV what was received.
Okay, any questions? To the online voter registration?
Yes. And then for our monthly financials, Mr. Chair, so for the from March 17th to April 11th, our total expenditures is about $160,188. That includes, of course, payroll, rental, and things like that. And then, as reported earlier, our balance for our federal grants is $501,993.
Okay, any questions? Okay, item E, the 2024 financial disclosures.
All right. Okay, Mr. Chair, on your packet is beginning on page 33 is the individuals who filed their financial disclosures reports or extensions, and as well as their conflict of interest forms. On page, on page 48, there is on page 40, there's a summary of the report. So today there are a total of 392 that need to file, 128 of them being full financial disclosures. As of today, 88 have filed their financial disclosures. And then the deadline is actually April 22nd of this year. So of course, once the deadline has closed, we'll report to you guys with the final numbers.
Okay, the deadline is April 22nd.
Yes, April 22nd of this month.
Yes. Yep.
And then this is for fiscal year 2024.
24.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions, comments from commissioners? Okay, let's move on to old business. I know there's quite a few. What I'd like to do is go through the old business and then motion to recess until Wednesday, April 16th, and only because we're taking up the executive director's evaluation as well as the election of officers. And I'd rather have all the commissioners, the other 3 commissioners present at that time. So are there any objections to that?
No objection.
Okay, so let's go on to old business and we'll then recess after that. Campaign Finance Committee, this is the working
Yes.
session part, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so on this form, our commissioners, so this is the Campaign Finance Committee completed its review of all reports as of April 3rd that were received. So the beginning of the page is actually the summary of our findings. And then if you turn to the next page, it actually details those findings with the particular committees. And then immediately after the report is the draft correspondence that we have prepared for based on you guys' approval.
We have to go through each of those, right?
Yes. Oh,
It's
yeah. Oh, this one, Mr. Chair. The long Chair. It's
still
the-
the long,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we had to separate it.
Yeah.
So again, so the first page is the summary of the findings, and then of course the next page after will be the details.
Okay, you want to go through each of those?
Do you have any?
So the correspondence is just a general correspondence. The yellow highlights is what are the violations based on the statutes. And if you go committee by committee on the review findings, what the correspondence would indicate is first we would address the committee, and then the highlights would be wherever you see an X on that committee's name, we would just let them know that we found these potential violations, and just moving forward. Only because the 2024 election, a lot of the committees have already closed out their reports. They're no longer filing supplemental reports. There's only probably around 20 to 30 committees, and a lot of those are incumbents
Yeah.
with surplus. So for the committees that closed out, I don't know. The correspondence was just how the board wanted to do it. Because otherwise, if you wanted to go the route of imposing a fine, you would have to go committee by committee. We don't have a set standard on how to impose a fine on the committee based on the violations. It's kind of what we're moving towards.
Going forward, yeah.
That's why after the draft correspondence, we have a draft update to GAR so that moving forward in future elections, we can work to impose fines with a standard. Right now, we don't have a standard. You would have to go committee by committee, violation by violation. And it's all circumstantial. They don't all report the same way. So it would really go report by report.
Okay, so forget the 2024 reports, that's already closed. I think this is a matter of going forward to the
Yes.
next election and giving potential candidates the information
Yes.
and the requirements for filing the finance reports, right? Okay. Any comments or questions? You want to go through the fines potential fines.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, but before we go, can I get approval from the commission if they are fine disseminating this correspondences to the committees?
Yeah, we have to go by each advisory, right?
Yeah, well, so the way the correspondence is broken down, of course, whatever violation is listed out, so what we will do is we will simply just tag what if there is a violation, what it will be on the correspondence, but it lists pretty much everything, so not everyone will get the same.
Yeah.
But it's the highlight.
Yeah, that's the highlight of how the correspondence will look. Yeah.
Yeah. So for instance, if your committee has an issue with a bank account information, that's the only thing that will show up for that letter, for that committee.
Yes, that's correct.
So these are all the potentials.
Mhm, yeah.
Okay. So you need a motion to pass this?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, so move.
Okay, Commissioner Pinala's motion to pass the candidate correspondence letter. Is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Gumatauta, second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Oppose? Ayes have it, the motion is adopted. Correspondence.
All right, Mr. Chair, on page 6 is our edits to the GAR. So, of course, so there are, the GAR is still there's still a few sections that remain intact, but we did actually include some things such as 3106, which is electronic reporting. By placing this into the GAR, we actually require the candidates and committee to file their campaign reports electronically. And then we also placed in the temporary acceptance and rejections of reports. That one can be found on page 10. So this one, Mr. Chair, is just virtually saying, like, if a candidate or a committee comes in and files the reports and they did notice that there is a deficiency and there is something to be corrected, if they do come in and correct it and give a written explanation within 7 days, then no fines may be imposed. But of course, if they exceed that, then that's when the commission can move into administering any fines. There also was, we added the complaints and investigation timelines in that. And then for the schedule of fines, you can actually find that on page 14 or page 15, beginning there, and then also on page beginning on page 14 as well. I mean, sorry, 16.
Okay, any questions, comments on the fines? I mean, and how would the fines be levied?
So if you can take a look at page 15, Mr. Chair, so this one will be contributions in excess of $1,000. So as part of them will be if you receive any contributions in excess of $1 to 120, for $1 to 250, $100 fine will be imposed on that. And then of course from 5,000 and up, it'll be $1,000 fine on that.
So, yeah, so these fines would be, but how are they issued to the candidate? Do we send them a letter with an invoice, or
Yes,
how do we collect from them?
Yes, well, how we would do is we will send them a letter, and of course, right now, so any fine opposed will be deposited to the treasury. So,
General fund.
yeah, to the general fund.
And if they don't pay, do we put an interest?
We would, I guess, forward them to the Attorney General's office for any further action.
So the check
questions?
is made to Treasurer Guam, right? Is that what?
Yes,
Is that what you're
yeah.
saying? So if they don't, what happens if they don't turn it in? Do we,
We would forward their names to the Attorney General, and then the Attorney General will move from there on.
So while we could enforce the fine, we don't have the, I mean, we don't have the enforcement authority.
Yeah,
I mean, we can collect it, but,
yes.
yeah. Okay. Any further questions? And you need a motion to also pass this, right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, just at least for the record as well as for the commissioners' edification in terms of what we changed, because we went from having 6 sections to having 16 sections. So I just want to make sure you understand what is encompassing under the new rules. So section 3104, if you look there, is a new provision with regard to record keeping. And it just basically requires, and the reason a lot of these have been put in there is because of a lot of the violations that were, when the staff reviewed the committee reports. Remember, what they were telling you is that people do it very differently. And so what we're trying to do with these rules and regulation is to try to uniform the process so that it would be easier to review and quicker to review to determine if there's any violations. So it sort of sets baseline standards of what each committee needs to comply with in order to consider their committee report as a valid report, right? So with regard to record keeping, it states, for example, that all candidates and committees shall be required to keep detailed accounting and comprehensive record of all receipts and checks issued and received, deposit slips and bank statements for the candidate, committee, or organization, and shall provide records to the Guam Election Commission upon request. And I think the issue here was if they weren't adequately keeping accounting records, all they would say is we don't keep those records, and the commission really doesn't have any standards. At least this standard is saying, hey, you need to keep a copy of the checks, you need to keep a copy of the deposit slips so that they can verify with the bank statements. So that's basically setting the standard here. Also, with regard to amending reports, it allows a candidate, and we're putting it into the rules, that they're allowed to amend reports. 3106 again is the electronic reports. But for example, section 3107, which is the new one, allows the Guam Election Commission to temporarily accept or reject reports and give the candidates or committee members an opportunity to cure. So in this case, someone turns in something, these guys will review it. If they say, well, we'll temporarily accept it, but if we find any discrepancies or deficiencies, we're going to give you time to fix it. And I think the cure period, if you look at section C2, they have 7 days to fix the report. And then if everything is fixed, then there'll be no fine will be imposed. If it's not fixed within 15 days, then they'll be subject to a fine of whatever that is. And then there's also an appeal process. So basically, this rule sets forth the due process for someone who may have submitted a deficient committee report, right? So here we're spelling it out of what the process is, giving them ample due process in order to comply. So I think that's very important because it's very difficult to assess an arbitrary fine without giving them due process. So right here spells out the due process And if they don't do it, then that's when they'll be subject to the fine.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I might add. So on page 16 on the schedule of fines, so we just also want to bring it to the board's attention that there is still a pending legislation out there regarding quarterly reportings. So if that legislation does pass, then we may have to make some adjustments to the fine.
Minor adjustment.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, any questions or comments on that? At least it sets the standards in writing, which has been missing, right? Okay,
The other thing, Mr. Chair, that's we highlighted in here is a new section 3110, which is with regard to advisory opinions. And so it sort of sets, again, standards. If someone had a question before the commission, the timelines, what they need to submit in order for the Guam Election Commission to review their question, what evidence they have or whatever documentation they want or supporting documentations they want the Election Commission to consider. It gives them the timeline so that everyone's at least well aware that if we're going to do something and we don't have a definite answer, we can ask for the advisory opinion, and that advisory opinion will be out within 30 days. Right? Is it 30 days?
yeah, 30 days.
So that they can either proceed or discontinue with whatever they were doing. But this is very important because a lot of times you get, as you guys know, you get calls during elections that, can we do this? But this sort of formalizes the authority. And then if anyone gets dinged, they're protected if they have this advisory opinion from the Election Commission that they won't. The other significant section that, or any questions on the advisory opinions?
No, it makes sense, yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the other section that's pretty significant, at least from the legal standpoint, is section 3112, which we did not have before, which actually sets forth the hearing procedures and timelines for enforcement actions. So it's sort of like the civil rules, like in court, the court has their rules on if you're going to file a civil case, this is what you need to do. This is basically what this section does. It says if you're going to file an enforcement or a violation of the campaign finance sections, this is what you need to submit. A notice of violation. A notice of violation has to include this, and these are the timelines. All parties have an option of an informal hearing or a formal hearing. And then there are due process provisions as well in there. And then again, the commission's decisions, the availability to appeal the final decision. So that's basically spells that out, which again provides in detail what the process would be for someone challenging or filing a complaint with the commission for a violation of the campaign finance provisions. And those highlighted days are just pending. I mean, you guys can change them, but those are just what we thought may be reasonable.
Yeah, any comments or questions on the dates? Okay.
Another provision that the staff thought was really important to have is a specific provision on exceeding contribution limits. And this primarily focuses on identifying when those limits apply per election, per candidate, right? And it actually outlines who the committee's responsibility to determine or to account for each of those contributions coming in to ensure there's no excess contributions. One of the things that it does provide is, for example, because the law says it's per candidate, per election, we have in our laws the way the governor and lieutenant governor committees, it's one committee, right? The law doesn't say it restricts the contribution per committee, it restricts it per candidate. But what the rules are going to require, if passed, is that the committee needs to make sure they record keep. If they get $1,000 for this one fundraiser, they have to allocate 500 to the governors and 500 to the lieutenant governor, so the total contribution's 1,000. They also have to keep records for corporate contributions, right? Because the corporate contribution is limited to $500 per fundraising ticket. So they need to, it's just requiring the committees to account for the contributions coming in to go to the correct candidate and to ensure there's no excess contribution.
So Vince, in the case of like a governor or lieutenant governor, if you don't have, so there are candidates that are running for governor that have filed. There's no lieutenant governor yet,
So they're subject to the regular limit,
the
right?
regular limit of
Of
$1,000 per candidate.
$1,000 per candidate per. And that's why it's important to, if you're raising money now and you don't have the lieutenant governor candidate, that you're following the limits, right? And then when you do get it, then you start accounting for the additional contributions
yeah.
for the lieutenant governor candidates, right? And that's, again, just for transparency reasons and to make it easier for the staff to reconcile that, because we don't know when a committee of two is going to become
Yeah.
just that, right?
Mr. Chair, just to be real clear on this one. So say you have a candidate just running for governor, I donate $1,000, I hit my limit, right? But he doesn't have a lieutenant governor yet candidate. The lieutenant governor candidate comes, a couple months down the road. Can I give another 1,000 or I'm already maxed?
Well, you're maxed for the governor, right? And then, again, that's per election, per calendar year until that point. So now when the
When he gets a
lieutenant governor
candidate, yeah.
comes in, then you'll contribute another 1,000 for the lieutenant governor.
Oh, okay.
Because it's per candidate per election.
Yeah.
Lieutenant governor is, although they run as a team, it's really a separate
Yeah.
candidate.
Right.
So if they run as a team and I donate 1,000, that's it.
Well,
No.
as long as you have two candidates running, then you can, of course, go up to the $2,000, right? But if, right now, unless you have a team, the limit's 1,000.
Okay, got it. I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the days, the grace period, the days are fine. They seem
Yeah.
reasonable, whether it's 10 or
Yeah, the
20
key is the
calendar
candidate,
days.
right? You're donating to the
Yeah.
candidate.
So I think, once this is passed, I think it's important that the candidates or their treasurers or whoever is preparing these reports attend those workshops.
Oh, yes. Once these things are passed, we will be incorporating them into the candidate
Packet.
seminars, yeah.
So the last provision that's sort of new in here is putting the onus on the committees to ensure proper documenting of efforts to identify donors. So for instance, if you either have excess contributions and you need to return those excess contributions to the donor, but you can't find the donor, the appropriate, according to the law, is those funds will be escheated to the government of Guam, right? But what the Guam Election Commission wants is they want records of you trying to make a good faith effort in identifying who these donors and trying to give the money back to them. If that doesn't work, then that's when it will be, the last ditch effort is to escheat to the government of Guam. So that's what this section 3115 actually provides for. So it says what your duty is, how you document, or how did you go about complying with your duty, what documents are required, and then what you need to submit to the GEC before you actually escheat to the government of Guam. So that's sort of the highlight of the new provisions of the rules.
Okay, any further questions or comments? And then you need a motion for this as
Yeah,
well,
yes,
right?
sir. Because this will have to go through the AAA
Yeah,
process.
AAA process, right.
And then, of
Okay.
course, if passed, we will update the timeline reflecting the publications and then the hearing dates for it.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the election campaign contribution expenditure changes?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, as outlined by legal, moved by, a motion by Commissioner Penala, is there a second? Commissioner Gumatauta, second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? The ayes have it, then this is adopted. We'll move to the next one.
All right, sir, so next, beginning on page 20 to 32 is our, the committee asked for an advisory opinion. So basically, these opinions, there are 7 of them. They come from some common some questions we did receive in the in the 2024 election and other preceding elections. They range from what are appropriate expenditures, like in the case of gasoline expenses, that's advisory opinion number 1. Number 2 is campaign funds for sponsorship, nonprofit fundraiser events, sporting events, and sporting teams. 3 is regarding campaign expenditures for travel, lodging, baggage expenses, and other related campaign supply purchases. 4 is campaign funds for meals served at campaign pocket meetings. 5 is use of campaign funds for appreciation events and meals. 6 is campaign funds for advertisements and political signs. And then the last one is contributions received after fundraising event and application of corporate contribution limits to joint campaign committees. And then these are the opinions provided for each of them.
And so these advisory opinions just clarify specifically what the campaign funds can be used for,
Yes. and
based on these inquiries.
I believe it, and then if the board does adopt it, these will be placed into our committee our campaign trainings as well.
And we have to approve each of these separately, right?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, the process to sort of analyzing these questions and these expenditures is we took a look first of all at Guam law, and then we took a look at the FEC, which is the federal law, and we find that it would tend to comply, we would have to comply with generally federal law because we do have federal elections that we conduct, and it would just be prudent to sort of follow whatever guidelines the FEC has provided in some of these instances. Then we also took a look at some other state jurisdictions to sort of see what they were doing and what their election commission and ethics commissions have opined on the same subject. And then we've provided guidelines as to what we believe the rules are interpreted to be and what any record-keeping requirements that are required in order to justify the expense as a campaign-related expenditure. So for instance, for gas, we took a look at, of course, 17110A, and that's the general provision that says any expenditures must be used for the candidate's own campaign. And then we take a look at the federal guidelines as well, and incorporating the Guam law that prohibits the personal use of campaign funds. And then it defines what personal use is as any expense that would exist irrespective of the candidate's campaign or duties as an official office holder. So it's also known as the irrespective test. So that means would someone gas their car regardless of where they were running for office or not? Would they make that expense? And generally, yes, when you're driving your personal car, right, you would make that expense. And that sort of coincides with what other states have done. So even under the FEC, it does allow campaign funds to be used for vehicles used for campaign-related purposes, provided that any personal use is incidental, meaning it's very minimal. So if you're driving to from your house to a campaign event, then that's sort of a minimal type of cost that no one would really question. But if you're using your car most of the day for your personal business, and you just go to one event for that day, you shouldn't be able to expense that entire gas bill, right? So what you're required to do in order to comply, if you look under record keeping, is have mileage logs. So if you're going from your office to a campaign event, to sort of keep track of that, keep track of receipts and any reimbursements. So it sort of lays out in the advisory opinion, if you're going to claim this and you want to claim it, these are the records you need to keep. So it doesn't say you cannot do it, but if you're going to do it, this is what you need to do. Right? So that's basically what this advisory, and that's sort of what all the other advisory opinions provide, is that we take a look at what the Guam law is, we take a look at what the FEC provides, and we try to mirror those to the extent that we can, and try to sort of put in some examples, like for the next one, advisory opinion on nonprofit fundraising events, sporting events, and sports teams. I think we get this question every election. And it's very important because federal law actually prohibits the use unless there's some kind of specific campaign or voting initiative that's going to happen at the function, right? So if you're going to, and if you look at the back under the examples, so what's permissible is a candidate sponsors a local nonprofit 5K walk and pays the entry fee for using the campaign funds in order to distribute campaign literature, wear campaign branded clothing, and meet the voters. So that's considered a permissible use. But if you look at the first non-permissible use, a candidate donates $500 from the campaign to a church fundraiser with no campaign messaging or attendance involved. So that's considered prohibited, right? So here are some examples that we use to provide guidance. But again, the requirements is there must be a clear and direct connection to the campaign. The expenditure is not personal or philanthropic in nature. Charitable giving for goodwill is not a legitimate campaign expense.
Sorry,
So if you're going to,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I think Colonel Moffin has just
Oh,
stepped
so-
out. Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we're not in quorum at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, you just stepped out, so
you want to read?
we just recess.
Or you can just,
Or just for discussion?
Yeah, okay.
Can I have the vice chair's return, Vince? You want to continue?
Sorry.
Yes, sir, for each.
For each of the advisory opinions, we try to put together something so that whoever's the user of the opinions actually has pretty good guidance in what they need to do. Again, at every conclusion, every case could be specific, so there may be instances where the advisory opinions don't fit exactly, but they can still come back to the commission through the advisory opinion section of the rules that you guys adopted earlier to ask for further questions and guidance.
Okay, and we need to approve each of these individually, right?
Yes.
By motion. Okay, so for advisory opinion 25-01, which is the expenditure for gasoline expenses, is there a motion to accept the advisory opinion?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Pinala. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Gamtauta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, advisory opinion 2501 is adopted. Moving on to advisory opinion 25-02, which is the campaign funds for sponsoring nonprofit fundraising events, sporting events, and sport team uniforms. A motion to accept advisory opinion 25-02 as written. Moved by Commissioner Gamtauta. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Pinala. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, advisory opinion 2502 is adopted. Moving on to advisory opinion 2503, which is campaign expenditures for travel, lodging, and baggage expenses related to campaign supply purchases. Motion to accept 2503.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Commissioner Pinala, second by Commissioner Gamtauta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, advisory opinion 2503 is adopted. Moving on to advisory opinion 2504, which is campaign funds for meals served at campaign pocket meetings. Is there a motion to accept advisory opinion 2504 as written?
So
Moved by Commissioner Gamtauta. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Pinala. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Advisory opinion 2504 is adopted. Moving on to advisory opinion 2505, which is the use of campaign funds for appreciation events and meals. Is there a motion to accept advisory opinion 2505 as presented?
So move.
Moved by Commissioner Pinala, second by Commissioner Gamtauta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Advisory opinion 2505 is adopted. Moving on to advisory opinion 2506, the use of campaign funds for advertisements and political signs. Is there a motion to accept advisory opinion 2506 as presented? Moved by Commissioner Gamtauta. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Pinala. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Advisory opinion 2506 is adopted. Moving on to advisory opinion 2507, which is contributions received at a fundraising event or application of corporate contribution limits to joint campaign committees. Is there a motion to accept
So moved, Mr.
2507? Motion by Commissioner Pinala, second by Commissioner Gamtauta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, advisory opinion 2507 is adopted. Okay, moving to modernizing
Oh.
plans. Or do you have any more on the advisory?
No, that's it, Mr. Chair, for Campaign Finance
Finance,
Committee.
okay. Then item B, election manual update.
So here, sir, we have your election manual updates. We did, the committee did meet and did have some, we went through and reviewed it. So you can actually find we actually included some new verbiage. Particularly, we added some guidelines to online registration that can be found on page 13. When this manual is actually developed, online registration actually was very new and we didn't really have it. So we now have been incorporating some of the process. So we want to go ahead and write down those processes. We also included some sections for early voting. So of course, as we all know, that early voting is now no excuses needed. So we did draft some rules regarding early voting, the facility to allow accessible voting, and then of course how the commission will, when looking for a venue, would qualify the venue for an early voting event. And then of course, Mr. Chair, we just updated the election manual to reflect any changes in the election code.
Have we incorporated the executive order? Or proof of?
No, not in this one.
Because I mean, on the online, they're
Yes.
declaring that they are U.S. citizen, but I think they need to submit
Yes.
a proof in that online registration, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, we will take a look at the executive order, and then of course we'll maybe we'll place it into the election manual.
Okay.
And then of course, if you guys have any questions regarding any of the edits or changes, please let me know.
Yeah, the edits and changes are marked in red.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it at least provides some clarity on
Yes.
some of these provisions, right? So, yeah, I would just use whatever is required in the executive order to
Okay.
incorporate those so that when we do make a change, it's one shot.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the executive order, and then we'll see where it can be placed in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mostly just in the registration.
Yes.
Yeah,
The reg area,
registration.
yeah. Yeah, and then we would probably have to look into the absentee voting section, because we do allow that 10-day grace period, but the order actually does away with that.
Yes, so with that, the ballot must be received
By election.
by election day
yeah.
at
I-
8 p.m.
8 p.m. I believe it's at the close of the polls. So, yeah.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? And we can always bring it back to Tom or
Yes.
Maria when they
Yeah.
return, so. But you need a motion to adopt this as well, right? The changes?
Yes, because this will also go through the AAA process as well. We would, if you were to adopt, we need a motion to adopt this if we're going to proceed forward.
How does that work when, we're still working on the executive order and we need those rules to be codified by the legislature?
Oh,
Can we
this-
go ahead?
Well, what we can do, Commissioner Penal, is we can look more into it, and then we'll come back to you if you
Or
want. if
can
you
we just
prefer.
go ahead and approve it, as is and then subject to,
Uh,
would that work?
I believe, do you think that will?
I think you can approve it subject to
To
the insertion of the executive order.
Other requirements.
Because there's really only two sections right now that's going to be affected, and that's the voter registration and the absentee voter.
Yeah.
And we can't really change the absentee
Yeah.
voter until we change the law.
Yeah.
So right now, it's just the voter registration.
Voter registration.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and approve this and then subject for, okay.
Yeah, so we need a motion to accept the changes to the election manual update, with the changes recommended by the commission staff, subject to changes imposed by the federal executive order.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Pinella,
It's not necessarily changes, but addition the federal.
well, it is a change for some, and then, of course, the additional provisions, yeah. Because the requirement of an ID or a proof of citizenship is new. Is new, yeah. Right now, we just make them,
Like the attestation provisions
Right.
will be removed because now you have to show.
proof of citizenship,
Right.
It would be replaced.
yeah. Okay, so is there a second to that motion? Second by Commissioner Matauta. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, the election manual update is adopted, subject to any corrections and additions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I'm sorry. Moving forward, item C, fiscal year 2026 budget request. We did again send our, to let you know, we did send our budget request back in January 31st. Yet we don't have any, there's no hearing that has been scheduled. So of course, we'll keep the board updated once the hearing has been scheduled.
Okay. Any questions, comments on the FY '26 budget? Okay, item D, the election administration and voting survey. Any updates on that?
Yes, we have sent our final draft survey, so it has been accepted, and we're just waiting for any comments and feedbacks from the EAC, from the EVE survey.
Okay. All right, then we have a slew of bills. You want to tackle each of those?
Okay, so Bill 5238, Mr. Chair, that bill has been rescinded. We are still currently working with our oversight to draft any changes or any amendments towards it. For Bill 53-38, they did have a public hearing on it, but right now it's not placed on the agenda, as well as Bill 54 and 55.
Okay, so the, just for public information, Bill 52 -38 is about the motor voter registration. So
Yes.
the commission recommended some changes to that. And that's why the author had pulled it back.
Yes.
Working on that.
Yeah.
Then Bill 5338 is safeguarding the privacy of registered voters. That's the names on the registration is to be removed. There was a public hearing on that already.
Yes, there was a public hearing already, and the commission had provided testimonies
Okay.
on 53, 54, and 55.
On 55,
Yes.
okay. And then Bill 2538.
And then Bill 2538 on page 41 attaches the testimony that we did provide on the relative to the electronic newspaper or modernizing public hearings notices requirements. So the GC's testimony is on page 41 for your review.
Okay, any questions on that? I know we asked Maria to provide us with the testimony, a copy of the testimony, so that's here. Okay, let's move on to item J, which is the general election administrative complaint. There's any changes to that?
No changes to that, sir. If the commission like, we can reach out again to the complainant and ask them if they would want to attend, I guess, maybe the next meeting if the commission's willing to address it.
This is on the Hakatnya voter registration
Yeah, I think
complaint
we should
file.
ask them if they want to
Pursue
continue,
it.
or if they've changed their mind, and
Okay.
maybe would like to just drop it.
Okay. Okay, so we'll write to the,
Yeah, it's been on the agenda for the last
Yes.
2 or 3 meetings, so if they don't want to, if they want to pursue it, then they need to appear before the commission meeting. Otherwise, then we would agree to remove it.
okay. So we'll reach out to them.
Yeah, we're in April already.
But we take each complaint valid and seriously,
Yes.
so it's not like we're trying to get rid of it, but we want the complainant to at least have the proper due process to show up.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, executive session, I think at this point we can motion to recess and until Wednesday, April 16th at 5:30 PM here at the Election Commission Conference Room, where we would take up the Executive Director's Performance Evaluation, as well as new business, and also elect officers for 2025,
Yes.
right? So is there a motion to,
I'm sorry? I believe it's 2 years. 2 years? Yeah. The chair.
I think it's every year we
Well,
have to
1 year.
elect.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Correctly. 1 year.
1 year, right?
Yes, 1 year.
1 year,
Yeah.
every year, yeah.
Okay.
But I'd like to have all the commissioners present for
Yeah,
both
we need to
the
have that.
evaluation and the election.
Both ways.
Yeah, both ways. Otherwise, I can be reelected and Joe, so. We had a gentleman's agreement, right?
Yeah,
So,
we did.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a motion to recess until
So
Wednesday,
moved, Mr. Chair?
April 16th at
Right,
5:30
5:30
PM?
PM.
Motion by Commissioner Penala, second by Commissioner Tao. Yeah, this Wednesday.
For election.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, the meeting is recessed until Wednesday at 5:30 PM.